Hello, everyone, and welcome to iCritic Live. This is the podcast where we talk about entertainment, pop culture, and life in between. I'm your host, Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes of your time here with me today. And you read the title, and I'm sure if you are living in the United States, you know exactly what the title is referring to, especially if you're listening to this when you're supposed to on November 4th, 2024 at 4 p.m. or after, because that's when the podcast goes up, and not just listening to it on a delay like a day or two later. Although I definitely appreciate it if you're still listening to it, but it might not have the same impact. And yes, I'm talking about the election. We are about to have a huge election. Now, every election is huge. This one feels particularly different. I've lived through a few elections in my life where, I think the first one I was aware of was Clinton versus Dole, and how my parents just really wanted Dole to win, which is Bob Dole. For those who might forgot, there's my printer, of course, settling while I'm starting the recording, and I don't feel like starting over, so we're just going to leave it in. Then there was Bush versus Gore, and then there was Bush versus Kerry, and Obama versus McCain, Obama versus Romney, and Clinton versus Trump, Biden versus Trump, and now we're at Harris and Trump. And so I've seen a few of these things. This one feels a little bit more different than usual. Now, I have stated in the past that I don't like discussing politics on this podcast. I would prefer these podcasts to be more lighthearted, more family-friendly. I made an exception for the Trump Bible and a couple other little things. And those are still going to be the exceptions because, no, I'm not going to talk about the election. In fact, I certainly want to talk about some things right now before the election happens, before things get crazy and we potentially start losing our minds because whatever side wins, the other side is not going to be happy. And I suspect social media and even conversations with family members and stuff to be very insufferable going forward. So we have some big news today and some interesting topics. I'm going to talk about a variety of little topics and things like that. And what are they going to be? Well, I guess you're just going to have to listen and find out. And if this is being listened to on Election Day, first of all, I hope you're going out. I hope you're voting. I'm not going to suggest who you should vote for, just that you vote. It is important to vote. And if you're a little stressed, well, maybe this podcast can help you de-stress you a little bit, if you will. Unfortunately, we do have to begin with some very, very sad news, and that is that music legend Quincy Jones has passed away. Quincy Jones was 91. He is the father of actress Rashida Jones, so some of you may kind of know him that way, but honestly, the man was a music legend. Aside from the fact that he wrote all these great jazz albums, Jazz Abroad, The Quiescentants, Golden Boy, You've Got It Bad Girl, he wrote some great music, but he also produced music for Dusty Springfield. He was the main producer on a couple Michael Jackson records, most notably Thriller. He did scores for some classic movies like In Cold Blood and The Color Purple and Roots. He also produced the Color Purple movie. Very good on that. He's performed with artists like Louis Armstrong and James Ingram and Tony Bennett. He has left Leslie Gore. How could I forget Leslie Gore? It's my party, and I'll cry if I want to. I mean, his music was so great, so great. I mean, and chances are, even if you don't know it, you have heard a Quincy Jones song. It is probably a great song that you heard because the man almost seemed incapable of producing bad music. And so it's kind of sad that the day before the election that he passes away and kind of gets the week, which is already going to be a little stressful for a lot of people. It kind of starts the week on a sour note. And depending on how the election goes tomorrow, maybe it just makes the week even worse. I don't know, but this was like not great news to wake up to. If you want to listen to like a great song, he produced, check out "Just Once" by James Ingram. That's I have listened to that song. I don't know how many times. So, and that's like a great example of just how good his music can be. All right, so with that sad news out of the way, let's talk about some good news. So, I'm not huge on lost media hunts. I think finding lost media is cool. It is always fun when you find media that was thought lost forever, and it turns out it's now found. The most notable piece of lost media that I would really love to see one day is whatever cut of The Day the Clown Cried is available. I know that it's been sent to a museum now, and I guess there's a possibility I'll get to see that someday. I don't know. Some people have actually watched the footage that was there. Apparently, there is no real cut of the movie. But, that's something I'd like to see. I also would like to see if dubbed episodes of Full Moon Wosagashita exist after episode 32. That seems like an unlikely thing because even though people seem to remember recording the dub, Justin Savakis, who's the CEO of Anamago and who was re-releasing the show, basically did what he could not find it, and believes that they were either lost or they never existed. And if you look at lost media YouTube channels and websites, it's interesting the things that people look for. It's interesting. Like, there's like this Walmart SpongeBob DVD that was advertised and was never released, and people have been looking forever for that thing. Well, one of the things that they've been looking for is something that was dubbed the most mysterious song in the internet or on the internet. And it was nicknamed Like the Wind or Blind the Wind because there was like, I guess, a cassette rip of the song, but it was like a partial rip of a song. It had like a little catchy beat. It sounded kind of fun, but the whole thing did not seem to exist, and no one could find this song. And so this actually started the search, I should say, in the early, maybe not early, but maybe the mid or late 2000s, where it wound up on the internet, of course, YouTube, and people were just looking for it. Like, what's the song? Where's the full-length version? What's it called? And today it was found. The song is called Subways of Your Mind by a German rock band called Fex. Now the song is available on the internet, and I'm sure it's going to spread like wildfire. Heck, this thing is so new in the discovery phase that I'm looking at the Wikipedia page and it hasn't updated the article. This song was so sought after. The most mysterious song in the internet has its own Wikipedia page, and it has not been updated to reflect that the song has been found. So, really cool when you find things like this. And this is why physical media is very important, because this song was found on another cassette tape that was provided by the band, along with a couple other songs that have since not been available on streaming. And that music was pretty much lost, but if it were not for physical media, the song would have stayed lost. And I sympathize with that, because I'm going to share like a little story. I remember years ago on the site mp3.com, it was like one of the first sites that you could download free legal mp3s, though most of the music on that site was not very good, to be honest. And I remember searching Pokemon, and I didn't find any official Pokemon songs, but I did find a song called For Always Forever. Now, I forgot who sang and wrote it, but it was a song for Pokemon the first movie, the English dub, that was supposed to be in the movie, but it got cut. And so, because of that, the song has never been found. Now, I downloaded that song, I had it on my MP3 player, I played it and played it and played it, and then I had a hard drive crash one day, and I lost all of this music. And while most of the music could be re-downloaded and stuff, this song could not. And I've been looking for it ever since. Maybe I'll make a separate podcast about this song. So I sympathize with people who want to find lost songs, and I'm glad that they were able to find this one. All right, so that's good news on the song front. What about the box office? Because the box office has some good news as well. And we're not talking about, big movies like Venom, which had a better than expected hold, or bad releases like there was a new Liam Neeson movie that opened at number 12. That thing isn't going to be in theaters for very long. But there's two bits of good information in the box office that I want to point out because it's like a signal that yes, the box office does have room for real, serious adult dramas, so long as the right ones are made and they're sold respectively. Now, the first one is Juror Number 2, directed by Clint Eastwood. Now, this seems like a strange thing to bring up because Juror Number 2 is notoriously getting screwed by Warner Brothers. It is potentially Clint Eastwood's final film. And it was originally going to go straight to Max. Like, they were just going to put it straight onto streaming. But as kind of a token gesture for all the years of hits that Eastwood has made for Warner Brothers, they decided they were going to put it in 50 theaters. But they would not be expanding it beyond those 50 theaters, and they would not be reporting box office results. This was basically a token gesture. For the record, I have tickets to see it on Wednesday. I'm in the weird situation where I'm near 5 of the theaters showing this movie, which almost seems like a shame. It seems like if you're only going to do 50, you should spread out a little bit more than that, but I get it. Major market, all that jazz. So what's the good news about any of this? Well, here's the thing. Even though Warner Brothers is not reporting numbers, or box office numbers, I should say, people find a way to find out the money and find out, how much things made. And it is estimated that on 35 of those screens, Juror Number 2 made about $250,000, which suggested almost sold out shows all day. Now, those are the kind of numbers that once they get to Warner Brothers, I'm not saying this is going to happen. In fact, David Zaslav might even poo-poo these numbers because he doesn't want to be proven wrong. But that gives me a little bit of hope that maybe someone will see the light. They already backtracked because at first they were going to say they're not going to do an Oscar marketing campaign for this movie. Then they said, well, we're going to do a small Oscar campaign for this. And they might backtrack and say, due to the unexpected response, we want to give people a longer shot and a better chance to see this in theaters. And Juror Number 2, if Warner Brothers plays their cards correctly, could be the surprise hit of the season that nobody saw coming. Ironically, all because Warner Brothers basically almost buried it on streaming. And by the way, if this movie does better than they expect, maybe they should take some of that, demand for seeing things that are forbidden and release Coyote versus Acme. I don't know. It's a hope. I guess we will find out. The other good box office news is the box office numbers for Conclave. Now, Conclave, which I'm going to be seeing that next week. There's too many movies I want to see this week that I've only got like 1 week to see. So since Conclave is probably still going to be there next week, I will see it next week. Well, this is a big Oscar player. Ralph Fiennes is in contention to potentially win a Best Actor Oscar for this movie. And it was from the director of All Quiet on the Western Front, Edward Berger. I believe this is his first American film. He made waves with Netflix's All Quiet on the Western Front, which won several Oscars a couple years ago. His next film will be with Netflix. Maybe if this continues to be the big thing, maybe he can push Netflix to release that movie in more theaters for next time. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we'll see. So Conclave is like a $20 million movie. It's not really that, expensive. And on the opening weekend, it made $6.7 million. I think it opened at number 3, if my memory serves correctly. Now then, that's pretty good for a drama that's geared for adults. But of course, the fear is like, all right, yeah, it's going to make almost $7 million, but then it's going to crater next week because all the film snobs went out to see it, and they're not and then it's going to crash the next week. Well, the second weekend, the 3-day gross was 5.3 million, which means that the movie has made domestically 15.2 million. That's about a 20% or less drop. And the only reason you would get a 20% or less drop is because of good word of mouth. Now, keep in mind, this is not like a wide release. This movie has been put on about 1,700 screens, where the average is 4,000. So this movie, and it's not on any premium screens, like Venom is taking up all of those screens. And it will never get premium screens. You know, it's got Wicked and Moana and Gladiator 2 to contend with. But what this is showing is like, look, if you make a really good adult drama, you put it out there, and I bet you Focus Features, if they don't let their parent company, NBC Universal, screw them on this, because Universal can definitely botch this. If they are smart, they will probably leave it in theaters for the next few months, through the holiday season. There's no streaming release date anywhere in sight. Let the word of mouth carry it. What if this thing made $80 to $100 million on a $20 million budget? I mean, the P&R is probably, 10 or 15 million. That's a pretty good return on investment. And then once it gets nominated for all these Oscars, which I'm certain it will be. I mean, I haven't seen the movie, but the word of mouth is extremely good. A couple of my friends did not like it as much as other critics did. So again, I have to wait and see, but overall, it's doing very, very well, and I'm hoping that movies like this, and even the surprise turnout for Juror Number 2 on what was really a pitiful theatrical release, shows that, yes, you can release adult dramas, they will make money. Maybe they're not going to make $400 million for the most part, but you keep them reasonably budgeted at $10 to $20 million, and you keep them in theaters and you let the word of mouth grow, they will ultimately prove to be very profitable. And I think these are the movies that they can use to start conditioning people to go back to the theaters. Like, hey, we're not putting this on streaming within 45 days. It's going to stay in theaters because we want Academy voters and things like that to see it on the big screen. Wouldn't it be funny if Conclave and Juror Number 2 are the strongest cases for theatrical exhibition, even more so than like Wicked or something like that? That would be hilarious, in my opinion. So, good news at the box office in those cases. Now, remember how I talked about how maybe Edward Berger can use the success of Conclave to push his next Netflix film into theaters? Well, that's because, and yeah, we're going to be returning to this topic because it's an ever-evolving topic and I'm very fascinated by it. Greta Gerwig might be getting her Narnia movie into IMAX for a couple weeks in November around the Thanksgiving holiday break, and then the movie would go to Netflix on Christmas. Now, that would be great, in my opinion, if that happens. There's no confirmation if that will, and I think that would personally be great. However, there is someone who I follow on X who disagrees. Now, his name is Luis Fernando, and for the record, I follow him. I like his writing. He does like box office commentary and things like that, and he wrote an opinion piece that I think is interesting. I will say I mostly disagree with it, but I also understand where he's coming from, and that's why I kind of want to discuss it in general with you guys. So, he wrote on X, "I'm really sorry. I understand that when Greta Gerwig signed up for the Narnia Films gig, she didn't have the leverage Barbie gave her to better negotiate with Netflix. But I strongly disagree that now her Narnia film is pushing a Thanksgiving or Christmas 2026 slot in IMAX theaters globally, potentially undercutting space and threatening legs from directors, creatives, producers, movies, and studios truly committed with and reliant on theatrical, who have been aiming those slots with years in advance. The same way China does not allow Hollywood films to debut in their holiday weekends to their local movies, which have no other alternative for revenue, have the priority over foreign films over those special dates. Theaters should 100% prevent any studio or streamer not committed with theatrical from getting exhibition space only when they want, let alone in any of the most juicy holiday weekends of the year. A Netflix film should never have access to PLF, that's premium large film. Usually they call it S, but whatever. Over a purely theatrical release, and should never have access to holiday boosted slots such summer, Thanksgiving, or Christmas that purely theatrical films literally kill for the chance to get. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Or Netflix gives Narnia a full on theatrical release and commits to do the same with future blockbusters, or exhibitors should only allow them to get their limited releases on regular screens way out of any major Hollywood. There's a couple of words missing here, but I kind of get the general thought. It can't just happen when it's convenient, and especially can't happen at the expense of movies truly committed with theatrical. That's also a way to make creatives think twice before signing deals with a distributor, knowing fully well that they don't have theatrical as their focus. Directors and producers also can't have the cake and eat it too. Like Margot Robbie did, allow yourself to get less money now with a long-term view instead of prioritizing short-term gains and then remembering that your dream was to have your films playing in theaters. That's not even ethical. So that's his rant. And by the way, that's a well thought out rant. I actually don't completely disagree with that. You know, Netflix has this crummy little thing about basically like trying to get Hollywood to bend to their will rather than working with them. They're the primary reason why the Academy Awards are changing one of their qualifications for Best Picture next year and other major categories, to where if you want to be considered for some of the major categories, documentary and stuff notwithstanding, because documentaries rarely make money in theaters, you have to commit to putting your movie in theaters in, I think, 40 or 50 of the biggest cities in America. And I think you have to do it for at least a few weeks. Like, it can't go there for 1 week and then go to streaming like the following week. Like, it has to respect a certain window. Now, the thing is, I think this is a little targeted towards everyone, because you've seen things like The Wild Robot going to streaming, maybe not on Peacock, but being purchasable on streaming like 17 days after it came out. That's a movie that does not need to be on streaming for at least 2 months. So it might be partially geared towards situations like that, if I'm remembering this correctly. But I think the whole thing, like, well, it has to be in this many theaters for so much amount of time, I'm thinking that that is geared towards Netflix specifically. Now, I don't think that means that studios have to start with 40 or 50 theaters nationwide. They can probably start with 1 or 2, and as long as they, respect that window and they eventually get that movie out into the 50 theaters, then they're okay. I believe that that's what the Academy is doing to try to prevent streaming movies from competing for the Oscars as much as theatrical films. Now, I hope that they have some very specific rules. I have not looked at the rules to see what the caveats might be, because I would not be surprised if Netflix gooses those rules by say, okay, we're going to put this in these Academy-friendly theaters for like a week or two, and then we're going to have like a Fathom event one night and put it all across the nation for one night and get away with that. I don't know. I think there's a way that Netflix can get around that. They're like that annoying little kid who puts their finger an inch away from your face and says, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, because that's what Netflix does. That being said, I do disagree with this on a little bit of a deeper level, because Netflix is, for better or worse, a big movie player now. And they're not going to stop being a big movie player just because the theaters decide that they, don't want to play with them. Really, the theatrical exhibition is in like a very precarious place. I think that's why studios like Universal and stuff, breaking the window all the time and like, oh, this movie didn't do well. Well, put it on streaming. Just dump it on streaming. I mean, and the theaters have been reluctant to push back on that because they're still kind of in recovery mode. They need what they can get. And so they've seen the results of Netflix movies, like particularly Glass Onion, which did very, very well. And it's frustrating that movie did very well, and Netflix basically, dug their feet and was like, no, not going to do theatrical. So I get that Luis Fernando, he is right in that sense that Netflix does not get to take a premium screen away from a filmmaker who, is dedicated to theaters, from a studio that wants to be friends with theatrical. But I would like to propose a counter argument, because stockholders have a lot of sway over companies like this, and the shareholders have been bringing up over and over again, why isn't Netflix putting movies in theaters? Like, isn't that like an easy additional money? Like, if the box office does not care, why not put it in theaters? Why not, put Narnia in IMAX? We're spending $200 million on it. Why not make at least 20, 30, 70 million back on a limited release of the theatrical run? And if it's making money, why don't we just keep it in theaters, and then when it comes to Netflix, people will know where to go? I mean, the numbers have proven that movies that go theatrical do better on streaming. This is a way for Netflix to help themselves, and the shareholders know this, but they have a CEO who considers himself a disruptor still. Well, here's the thing. I bet you if some directors who have the leverage and clout to force theatrical onto Netflix because Netflix wants to work with this talent, yeah, it's not going to be the big push that everyone wants it to be, and it's going to be an inconvenience, but it's going to make some money. It's going to show the shareholders that, look, Netflix is leaving money on the table. Literally millions of dollars are being left on the table. On the table. Money is being left on the table. And why are the shareholders letting them do that? And I believe some moves like this, also moves like Margot Robbie basically taking that pay cut, I am okay with talent, whether it be inside Netflix or outside of Netflix, pushing Netflix to release movies in theaters, especially since Netflix produces so many movies. Now, they do make some movies that should not go anywhere near a movie theater, but, The Killer from David Fincher, come on, that should be in theaters. And I'm glad that Greta, even though she did sign on to this and probably should have known what she was getting into, I'm glad she's at least fighting for it. I'm glad that Rian Johnson is fighting for it. I'm glad that the actors and the directors are starting to turn their faces away from Netflix, because Netflix does not care about the theatrical exhibition. And you know what? I'm going to even play like a little 4D chess positive thing. What if in a couple years the theatrical market gets to a point where the theaters can start pushing back on the studios? Like, hey, look, you want to show your films in theaters, you have to respect a window, a big window. You have to respect a 75-day window or something like that. And if you break that, we will not only pull that movie from theaters, we'll pull all your movies from theaters. Like, what if the theaters get to a point where they can do that again? And then Netflix comes along, they get their little 2-week thing, and then they make it clear to Netflix, okay, look, we made this deal with you, and we're glad we did, but let's make it clear, you're going to be taking theatrical a lot more seriously going forward, or you're not going to get those premium screens when the filmmaker wants it. And if you can't give the filmmaker the theatrical release, then that filmmaker probably won't make stuff for Netflix. What if Gerwig and Johnson and Daniel Craig, what if they are setting the crumbs, the building blocks for Netflix eventually becoming a major theatrical player? And it's interesting that he brings up China because it's like, look, I don't want to do anything the way China does things because China's going to shoot themselves in the foot. Like they, I don't want to get too political, but they became a world player because they work with others. Now they want to pull back and recoil and basically pretend they're communists again, even though they're capitalists now. They're capitalists playing with advanced rules, rules that only advantage them. And it's like, look, I kind of want a free market, especially in the movie theaters. So I'm okay. Like, I think that if they can get this Narnia thing into IMAX, and what if they get it for, like, hey, it's going to be like a 2-week trial run with the option to extend it if it does especially well. Like, what if the Narnia movie makes a few $100 million in a theatrical run, and the shareholders say, hey, you know what? We want more of that cheddar. We want more. We see no disadvantage to that. And Netflix realizes, oh, okay, well, the shareholders are demanding it. The talent is demanding it. Let's go to theaters. And the theaters like say, okay, look, I'm glad that you want to, or we're glad we want you to be in the theaters, but we've got some terms. We've got some rules, and you're now going to follow them. So I think Louise wrote a very good piece. I respect this piece, and I agree with it on some level. And, you know, if what I've described does not happen, then yes, this scenario will tick me off. But at the end of the day, I'm a movie fan. I just want to see movies in theaters. And fun little story, I am going to a theater later this evening after I get off work, because I have to record these the day before. And I'm going to go see Emilia Perez in a theater, the Frida Theater, little local nonprofit theater that sometimes gets Netflix movies because they're nonprofit. Yeah, I could stream the movie in a week on Netflix. I'm still going to go to the theater because I just want to see their movies in theaters. I like seeing movies in theaters. I think that's where they are best seen. So anyway, that's my little thoughts on that. And that's where we're going to end this episode. And I'm curious what your thoughts on any of these topics are. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have your own thoughts? If you're listening to this podcast on a platform that allows comments like this, well, please do us a favor and leave those comments. We want to hear from you. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please do. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Deezer, we're on all the places that podcasts are found. And as always, take care of yourself, everyone. I'll see you at the movies. And that's my wife calling, so that's the perfect time for us to end this episode. Take care. Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters. And I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running. And of course, is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to. It is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, you know, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.